Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 116 of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning back into episode number 116 of the White Knuckle Podcast. Today, I have as a guest Miss Dayna Monroe. Some of you will remember Dayna from podcasts in the past, or a podcast in the past. In addition to that, I've got Clint co-hosting with me. Before we get into the show with Dayna, Clint and I talk a little bit about what's going on in the Midwest here in terms of the rut and what kind of action we're seeing. Clint talks a little bit about the buck that he harvested, which we'll have as a show next week. And then after we're done with all that, we'll get into the story of Miss Dayna Monroe and her coming out to Wisconsin for her first ever whitetail hunt. It was a pleasure. It was a privilege to be with her in the tree when all that went down. I'm glad that we were able to get it done on day two, because it was going to prove to be a tough struggle with the weather and all the challenges that presented. So with that, let's get into the show for the week. Here we go. Let's just talk real quick a little bit about what's going on. Obviously, you killed one earlier here this week. What date was it? The first, second?
Yeah, so it was Sunday, whatever day that is. Man, I'm losing track.
Right.
It was last Sunday. Yeah, all these days are blurring together.
Good problem to have, right?
Yeah, it is. Sort of, until you start forgetting things like eating and general personal hygiene and sleeping and
right.
That sort of thing. Yeah,
the general personal hygiene would be a deal breaker for me. That's why I make it a point to get up at about 3:45, 4 o'clock, shower every morning, and I think I'm going to start wearing face paint because I don't know. Every hat that I wear doesn't bring me luck, although I have had some hats that gave me decent luck, but not all the luck that I wanted. So anyway,
dude.
So let's talk about this weather. Like everybody is saying, I'm hearing reports from all over. I'm just trying to think of who I talked to later this. I talked to Shane Weist, who's a friend of White Knuckle, who used to film for White Knuckle, who now is a good friend of Shane Simpson. They're part of the dog tracking group.
Yeah, Callie.
Yeah, and he said he's never heard so much complaining. He said, but that said, he's on a track every day if he wanted to be. But he said it's a lot of people are struggling. I know that your weather down in Illinois is different than our weather here. I mean, today when I woke up, it was 4 degrees, and I promptly decided I'm not going hunting because I knew that I would have an uncomfortable sit, and when I have an uncomfortable sit, I'm like a cat on a hot tin roof, and I don't do anybody any favors. So,
I think there's value in that, is knowing how you're geared on the inside, and knowing your strengths and weaknesses. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going, you know what, when it's 4 degrees and my head's not in it, I'm doing more harm than good, and just taking a day, taking a morning off and just kind of regrouping and maybe getting intel or doing whatever. But yeah, our weather here has been it's been unseasonably cold the last couple of days. But we haven't been getting near the trouble that you guys have up there. I mean, it looks awful.
It's flipping snowing, and we'll get our guests for the show on here in just a little bit, but it's snowing every other day, and I feel bad. But I can't control the weather, and if I could, I certainly wouldn't be having this podcast. I'd be doing something maybe a whole lot more important. But It's just it's been the most odd rut in 30 some years of hunting that I've ever hunted, you know.
Yeah, so you guys have had lots of, like, how much snow have you had up there then?
I would say as a cumulative number, I would say over 10 inches.
Wow. Already.
Yeah. We've
That's
had
amazing.
3 or 4 snowfalls. 3 or 4 snowfalls.
Wow.
Like the first night that Dayna flew in on the 30th, picked her up from the airport. We went and got back here to my apartment. We shot bow. She was dialed in. We hopped in the truck. I went and showed her the land, hoping that a booner would run across the road in front of us. Didn't happen. And then woke up the next morning to, I'm gonna say, a good 4 inches, and that happened again while she was here, I believe, and then it happened again the day after she left. So we've had three or 4 snowfalls. One prior to her getting here too.
And that's not usual for this time of year, right? I mean,
No.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound it.
Like we all, as non-irritated hunters, at one point in time would say, "Oh my gosh, a snow during the rut would be so cool."
Right.
But not a snow during the rut would be so cool when it's 30 friggin' degrees all day. And it's 8 degrees when you get out. Yesterday morning, I went out and I went into a killer spot. And I was dressed for it. And it was, I think, 13 degrees. But, and I made it from 6 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. till 11 a.m. And I didn't die, but this morning I'm just like, enough's enough. I'm not going to do this again because I'm going to go nuts. But I guess what I'm curious to find out is, how do you think that that's affecting the rut, and how do you think it's affected your rut?
I don't know that. I don't know that you can answer that, Jason. When you look at statistical prevalence of what drives mature dosage cycle, it is strictly photo period. It's strictly daylight. So they're going to be, and it happens at the same time every year. It doesn't, moon phase doesn't matter. Weather conditions don't matter. But I feel like what weather conditions do influence is how many deer are up on their feet.
Movement.
And Dr. Strickland from Mississippi State's Deer Lab came on the pod and was talking about it before. He talked about different statistical variables in, like, say, wind speed. When it, give an example, when it was very, very calm, deer moved less. When it was very, very windy, they moved less. And there's like a sweet spot in the middle, And I feel like all weather variables have that sweet spot in them, or would stand to reason. So how it's affecting, I would think, does when they're, it would be strange to be a doe right now and go, okay, we just had fall about a day ago and now it's dead winter. What the heck? So that may change, looking at them, that may change their feeding patterns. It may change their preferred food source. You'd think they would want to carb up. But I would think that there's some variability with the weather given just the general movement that hunters are seeing. I don't think it's affecting, I don't know that it will affect conception rates or anything like that.
No, absolutely not.
It'll affect what people are seeing as far as daylight movement.
For real, yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's the thing that's hard to wrap my head around. Is like, everybody's like, "Wow, is the rut going on?" Of course, the rut's going on. For heaven's sakes, it's not going to stop. But what is going to stop? What is going to change? And it's a great unknown, because I don't know that any of us have ever experienced this before. Is how is this absolute frigid cold temperatures going to affect the movement of the deer,
Right.
What does it do to them in the winter? Well, it puts them in their bed until it's time to feed. So I'm gonna assume that it's gonna do the same thing to them during the rut, right?
Yeah, it would stand to reason. I mean, you think about it, deer in the winter, they yard up and they go into quote unquote energy conservation. They bed close to food sources and they move as little as possible, and they get that yardy type behavior that we'll see in those colder months in December and January. So
Right.
I would think I don't think day length has anything to do with that type of behavior. I feel like that's more metabolism driven, if anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So if what we may be seeing in transition here would be maybe does that are not bedding in those classic quote unquote doe bedding areas that everybody loves to crash this time of year. Maybe they're 75 yards away from a standing cornfield. Maybe they're bedding patterns. I don't know. I'm just truth be told, I'm just bullshit guessing.
Right. So I guess the bottom line is you're not seeing some humongous change in your rut.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm typically my favorite day to hunt of the entire calendar year is November the 7th and 8th, the 2 days. And if you look at, Boone and Crockett statistics, you're most likely to kill a bow.
Couldn't you have told me this before I decided to take November the 8th off, for heaven's sake?
Well, you're most likely to kill a booner on November the 8th with a bow. If you look back at historical prevalence data. Okay. So I tend to do all-day hunts around that. I'll do an all-dayer on the 7th, 8th, and 9th almost every year. And
dude, I got my hair cut today.
I got my cut yesterday, actually. I kind of took the day yesterday. But our weather yesterday for the 7th was abysmal. Windy, rain, it was just trash. And I glassed all over the place and didn't see much movement at all. Talking to the guys that hunt around here locally, same, today, on the flip side, that after the front passed through yesterday, and now we're into the 8th, sun came up and it's a wind chill of 11. That is extremely strange for our neck of the country as far as this early in the year.
Right on.
It was cold, but, it was a bluebird day, high pressure, excellent, sunny, just very crisp and frigid and cold. And I saw deer movement today. I wouldn't classify it as heavy rutting activity. I saw young bucks, and instead of seeking, they were nudging and pestering does a little. We had another decoy encounter today, but I still haven't seen a lot of it, like classic heavy, running up and down all over Hell's Half Acre type breeding yet. I don't know whether it's weather related. I don't know. Whether there's still a lot of agricultural crops coming out down here. I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah, that's the one.
I think the best is yet to come.
I agree with you. I think that it's going to be interesting. I unfortunately I've got some other commitments like my job, and my job turns out this week is to set up some stands for David Blanton, which is, I guess, a privilege. And then another day after I get them set up, I need to, take those guys out to the stand that I set up for them, or one of the stands that I'll be setting up for them. So that's going to kind of put me in a corner for a couple of days. But I think...
So you're working on a plan to garhole David Blanton.
I am working on a plan to garhole David Blanton, right?
Make it look good now.
I mean, hasn't he shot enough good bucks?
He's a great dude. He is. He's a great guy.
I don't.
One guys will ever come across.
I don't know him at all, but I will Monday night. they fly into Madison here, and it'll be a cool experience. This just the whole thing on the real estate side with Realtree has been good. I don't know if you watch the Outdoor Channel at all, but I happened to last night and noticed that Realtree United Country is sponsoring just a ton of shows. So that's kind of cool to see. And then I remember the guy I went turkey hunting with, Philip Culpepper. He was on Realtree Road Trips last night hunting at Bill Winke's place in Iowa. So, and he killed the giant there. So it was cool. He and I were texting back and forth about it, which is neat. But anyway, one of the other things that I wanted to ask you about is, and you sort of alluded to it, is like how are the crops affecting the movement? Like for me, on let's just say 1,000 acres, there's oh gosh, most of my timber that I'm hunting is got corn around it. Okay,
Yeah.
and most of everyone else's timber has got corn around it. I rode tonight from Portage to Boscobel, and I saw 3 deer, and I was going through on the 8th of November when normally it's like, playing Frogger. You know what I mean? And it's just odd. Yeah. So I think maybe, you think they're tied up in the corn?
I actually wrote about this very thing in one of the articles that I put out in North American Whitetail about 2 months ago. Like, I had this article that I predicted what I thought our late plant crops would give us.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those factors was, hey, there's probably going to be a lot of standing crops in. Now, what that does, I feel like, here we're in the Corn Belt in the Midwest, it just gives you tons of security cover to have a buck chase a doe into. Now, me personally, I don't think bucks bed in corn all that much. And I'll take a lot of heat for that probably. And they'll be like, I say, you're wrong. Dude, I just don't think it happens. And it doesn't make sense to me. If you look at deer as a prey species, that buck wants to see what's coming. He wants to smell what's coming, and wind does funny things in cornfields. You can't see a damn thing. I just don't think they bed in there like everyone thinks. On the flip side of that, I have seen with my own 2 eyes a mature buck run a doe into the standing corn in an attempt to keep her away from other bucks and sequester her, and try and tend to her. And it's security cover then. So, yeah, I think that phenomenon exists.
Sure.
I'm certain. But yeah, it makes it challenging. Here's what I feel like it challenges me. I like to do a lot of, long-range observation. The farm I was on this morning, it's still got corn all the way around it. And I have no idea who's coming and who's going. But one of my target bucks could be in there. I have no idea. I've got a bunch of cameras I need to pull in there sometime, but it makes it difficult for entry and exit too. You got to walk through standing corn that's loud as can be, or you got to take the edges and you bump them. Like, it's a lot of factors with that standing crop. A lot of it.
Definitely an odd year.
Mm-hmm.
Fair to say. Well, hey, should we could go on all night about that. Should we get our guest on the phone?
Yeah, man.
All right, let's do it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Tonight, I am joined by my esteemed co-host, the silver-tongued doctor himself, Mr. Clint McCoy. And on the other line, we have Miss Dayna Monroe back home safe and sound out in Colorado. Guys, how's it going tonight?
Great, man. Good to be with you. Hey, it's nice to talk to you finally. Congratulations on laying a whitetail down. That's awesome, man.
Thank you.
So I knew it'd be a bit of a surprise to you, but I didn't want you to worry about it at all. Clint, contrary to what everybody said, he's a nice guy. We were just we were just talking about the challenges that we've encountered this year, and I wanted to have you on the show just to sort of recap the time you got to spend in the whitetail woods, which you haven't done before. So I guess let's start there. What is in your opinion, Dayna? What is the biggest difference between what you do out west and what you do here in Wisconsin, or what you did here in Wisconsin for the little bit of time that you got to spend?
So I would probably say the biggest difference would just be having to sit and wait for the deer to come to you versus out here, you're on your feet and you can go out and make stuff happen, and you don't have to wait for the animals to come to you in order to be successful.
Right. I can, and we talked a little bit about that on the stand a couple different times, and I was curious how that would either wear on you as a hunter and you wouldn't like it, or maybe you would enjoy it. And I mean, I think that there's pluses and minuses to both things, but at the end of the day, I think you decided you liked Western hunting just a little bit better, correct?
Yes, a little bit. I am still a fan of the whitetail woods for sure.
You did. Unfortunately, I still feel bad that I didn't get to show you as much of it as I would have liked, because it just was really non-existent. And prior to you joining the phone call, Clint and I spent a little bit of time talking just about all the different people I've spoke with. I was talking with a guy that does bloodhound tracking, in Wisconsin here this time of year. He's super busy. And he just commented that he'd never seen so many people, or never heard so many people complain about a rut as what, he had here. But this morning it was 4 degrees out. So I'm kind of glad you didn't have to sit through that.
I'm very glad.
Clint, do you have any questions for Dayna before we get into
Dayna, tell me about, and let the listeners know kind of what your background is, and give us a short origin story of what makes Dayna tick.
Oh goodness. So I don't know where to start. I grew up in a small town, central Utah, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Just small town life. I wasn't really exposed to any city type stuff until later in life. I think I was about 21 or 22, and I moved to Salt Lake City, and I played high school sports, and that was kind of my life. And so once that ended, I didn't really know where to go with myself. And so I just tried all sorts of just random hobbies. And then I started getting into fitness a little bit more. And from there, I found hunting, and more specifically bow hunting. And once I found out, I was absolutely hooked. And I pretty much have spent every day, every weekend, every moment, that's all I think about is bow hunting. And pretty much everything I do is to prepare for hunting and prepare for being out in the woods with my bow.
Dayna, tell me this, who or how, where was that switch flipped? Was there someone in your life that was a mentor to you when it comes to hunting? How did you get exposed to it?
I was really exposed to it by Instagram. I followed a few people online and just saw that they were out shooting their bow. And at first it seemed, I was not drawn to it at first. I just thought it was stupid. And then the more I saw it, I was like, oh, there might be something to this. And then I started following more of the hunters and, some of the more famous hunters on Instagram. and they just seemed like really great people. And I really respected why they did it and how they did it. And that kind of just started a fire in me.
That's wild. But so that, when we look at origin stories for most of us whitetailers, and myself included, we've either got our granddad or our dad or an uncle or a friend or someone that says, "Hey, dude, why don't you go with us?" And we get exposed that way. So that's very 21st century of you. Like, hey, I saw these cool people on Instagram, and I was like, I want to try that. So that's kudos to you for jumping in with both feet.
Yeah. It's definitely been a rabbit hole for sure.
And so, what's your preferred game of choice out there then?
I'd say elk.
And your biggest?
What?
So, when it comes to elk, like, tell me the type of terrain and your biggest elk story that you got.
Well, I've only been hunting for like 2 years, so I've only been hunting elk for 2 years. But elk are just everywhere. I mean, they travel so much ground, and you can find them up to about 12,000 all the way down on the plains. And so it's really fun to try and find where they are. And I think the biggest reason I like them is because they're vocal. And for that reason, you can almost find them by them making noise and responding to your calls.
Right.
So, Dayna, you haven't had the opportunity. You haven't gotten an opportunity to harvest an elk yet, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a work in progress, and you've done a lot of this stuff on your own. I mean, you've got some friends that you go with it, but Clint, I learned that while Dayna was here, that she's not afraid to pack up her stuff on a Friday afternoon, and if everyone else is wanting to do something else, she'll just head to the mountains and camp overnight by herself. There's not a lot that she's afraid to do, but you just haven't had the opportunity yet on an elk or a mule deer, right?
Right. Yep. I was able to draw my bow back once on a mule deer this year, and wasn't able to connect.
Okay.
Clint, anything else before we get into the whole story?
Yeah, I'll just tell you straight out. I just respect the shit out of somebody like that. Like,
me too.
Just decide, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do this, and like be self-taught. Because that's where you learn your like most valuable like skills is self-reliance, is being self-taught and making mistakes and just doing the work. You can be taught by others, but man, that's it's nothing like elk. But when I didn't know a first thing about turkey hunting, and I didn't really have a turkey hunting mentor. And I spent 9 years getting my ass kicked by turkeys before I started returning the favor on them. And it was through that self-teaching that I got way better at it. So I respect the heck out of that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I do have, I have amazing teachers out here. I have such a great community that does help me, and that I'm able to ask questions, and that's willing to let me tag along, go on trips, scouting trips, all sorts of stuff like that. So I do have a really great support team now, and I've kind of created that for myself. But, in the beginning, it was just me. It was me trying to figure out how to do this, and that was very difficult.
Dayna, I'm curious, now that Clint's brought up the point, do you find more value in learning things on your own and not necessarily, maybe not necessarily more value, but do you find that you learn a little quicker when you learn things on your own versus having them be taught to you?
Definitely. I've always been the kind of person that, like, even if you tell me I shouldn't do this, sometimes I just need to learn for myself. And that my solo trips out there were definitely, it was definitely a test of, I don't know, of my will, because I would get up to the top of the trailhead and I'm like, you know what? It would be so easy to turn around and drive back home, sleep in my bed, instead of hike up 4 miles by myself up into the woods, like nobody else, just all by myself. And I was terrified. Like, I was absolutely terrified. But I went up there. I'm like, I really need to do this. I need to do this for myself. And I got up there and I was nervous. I wasn't really sure what to do, but I just kind of, I was winging it, and it was a really good learning experience. And I definitely feel like I learned more then than when I tag along with people.
Do you think that you experience some of the same things whitetail hunting or challenges, even though we were not ever that far apart, that you did, although very different things, but still there were challenges, were there not?
Right. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. There were, go ahead.
So I think, honestly, the biggest challenge I have when it comes to hunting is just being patient, because I'm not a patient person. I want stuff to happen. I want to be able to make it happen. And so it definitely teaches me a lot of patience.
Right. I didn't know that. I would have, I did not. I'm kind of shocked to hear that, because Clint, I studied Dayna when I had time, just because I was curious what kind of hunter she was, and you could tell that either she had a very good teacher, or she was part Indian, or she just got it. Hell, I don't know which one of the three, and it really doesn't matter. But she stood in a tree stand for, I don't know, 20 to 40 minutes, slowly moving her head back and forth, intently watching, looking for deer. And, a lot of us are stuck on our phone or, doing this, that, and the other. And, I was impressed and still am. You get it. You got it.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. You earned it.
I think, Jason, when you talk about just her getting it, I think you've spent a lot of time around various different hunters when it comes to whitetail game, and so have I. And you can tell that there are people that are hunters, and then there are people that are killers. You know what I mean? That just they've just got the it factor. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean any disrespect to one side or the other, but there are hunters and there are killers, and you cannot. I don't think you can teach that instinct. I think it's you either have it or you don't.
Dayna is a killer. There's zero question in my mind. There is zero question in my mind.
Yes.
That girl's hungry. That girl's hungry. Well, let's get into the story, Dayna. I'm just going to let you tell it. And Clint, you're certainly you can stop and ask questions along the way. The unfortunate part is I didn't get to spend a lot of time, showing Dayna the why we were at where we were at. Although I could tell that she was a hunter, and she probably could figure out, after sitting there and maybe seeing a few deer move, why we were at where we were at. So, Dayna, if you want me to set the story up, I can, or you can start it from the start. I guess I'd like to for folks that hadn't heard the podcast that I did with Dayna. I don't even remember exactly when it was. I'm going to have to go back and look into the archives. But Dayna had gotten my attention from being on another podcast, and I thought she was a very thoughtful, critical thinker. She was a thoughtful, critical thinker that had spent a considerable amount of time deciding whether or not she wanted to hunt. You know, Clint, you and I grew up in it. We just did it because that's just what life was, right?
Right.
And that wasn't the case for her. And when she actually made the decision to do it, she put some thought into it, and maybe, if I remember correctly, did some research and spent some time thinking about whether it was something she wanted to do. And I think as hunter recruitment and things like that become more and more important to the success of hunting overall, it's important we know people's why, because all of our whys are going to be a little bit different. And I wanted to know hers. So I had her on the show. That brought up a conversation about, her coming out hunting. A couple things happened, mainly my job changing, made that possible, and a few other things. And we talked throughout the summer, and I picked her up from the airport on the 30th of October, and Dayna, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. So yeah, you picked me up from the airport. It was still a little surreal at that point. I mean, it's not every day that you meet somebody the way that we did and connect the way that we did, and then end up hunting with them later in the year. And we went back, got all ready to go the next morning. Woke up early, went in for our first sit, and you kind of took it easy on me the first sit because you had me in a ladder stand, and I don't think you were quite sure how serious I was about everything. But we climbed up, sat for a little while, and it snowed the night before into the morning a little bit. And so we just kind of hung out for a few hours, saw a few deer here and there, just passing through, nothing really close. And I'm still not really sure what you were thinking at this point. I don't know if you were like, oh, I don't know if this girl's serious. I don't know if she's going to handle this. Maybe she's too cold. I don't know. But then that evening sit, you took me to probably one of the hardest sets you had on the property. And you climbed up first, got your stand all set up, and then I started climbing up. And after the fact, you told me that you kind of climbed up and then just said, I'm not even going to look. I don't even know if she's going to make it. And when I heard that, I'm like, well, what was I supposed to do? I'm not going to go back down. Like we're hunting. I have to make it all the way up. This is what we're doing. I got to make it up there. So I just nice and slow.
Let me preface all this by saying she was attached to a hunter safety system lifeline the whole time. So I don't want your mom. I don't want your mom or anybody else calling me and threatening me. But Clint, let me just, and for all the folks that are going to be listening, let me just say that morning I recognized very quickly that you were serious about hunting. I recognized that you possess the basic skills that I would have wanted in any hunter. And I think, although I wasn't your guide, to an extent we were going to, share a tree together for a few days, knowing that I had a limited amount of time to get it done. Knowing that I felt like I could trust you at that point, that morning, I knew that I could take you to one of the better spots that I had. I just didn't know it was going to get cold as hell and freeze that water hole up. But anyway, go ahead with getting up the tree and me trying not to pay attention to you.
Yeah, that was, it was a chore to get up that tree. I was cussing under my breath the whole way, just I will say that. I had to turn my hat backwards because it kept knocking on the steps and it was really annoying me. So I finally made it all the way up and we were sitting there for a couple hours, and I started to think to myself, because I was so cold. This was the night of Halloween, and I was so cold. My feet were numb. My hands were numb. My face was numb. I was so cold. And I started to think, I was scared about how I was going to get out because I couldn't feel my feet. And so that was what I was thinking about the whole time up there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get out of this stand. I might fall. I might eat it. I might get one of those steps to the face. I didn't even know. But we finally called it a night. We'd seen a few does, and I think, I don't know if we saw any bucks at this point, but I know we saw a few does. And then we climbed down, started to warm up, thank heavens, and got ready for the next day. And I remember Jason telling me that, he'd never really had a great November 1st. And so I didn't have high hopes for this day, just for kind of, I don't know, the lack of deer we saw the day before. I was just like, we just need to get in an area with some deer, see something, try and maybe pattern some of them where they're going. And we went and sat this other set, and we didn't see anything. We saw a coyote, but we had to rig up a little bow holder, and the coyote spotted me, so I didn't get to shoot it. But we didn't see anything that day. We got skunked on deer. And then that evening, I was a little discouraged at this point. That's just kind of how I get. I do get discouraged, but hunting sucks until it doesn't. So I just have to, keep that in mind, keep positive. I still have a few days, so it's still early in the trip. And then we go to this set later that evening, and it's a ladder stand. And I like ladder stands a lot more because they're just a lot easier to get into. And we get up in the ladder stand. It's still, we're not even ready at all at this point. And, I think I was getting ready to screw in the bow hanger on my left side. And you're still working on getting your camera set up, all of that. And we both look over and we see a buck, and we're just like, oh my gosh, there's a buck. And you're holding my bow. And so I throw the bow hanger on the seat. I think I did have my backpack hung up, so I didn't have to worry about that. And then I'm like, give me my bow. And so you give me my bow, and the camera was on the other side of me. So you're like, give me my camera. So I grabbed the camera, hand that to you, and you were able to get that out of the bag. And then I still don't know how the deer did not catch us. Like, I do not know, because we couldn't have been that quiet.
Dayna,
and we were moving.
You know what we call out here in southeastern Illinois? When we're hunting and stuff like that starts breaking down, we call that a good old-fashioned yard sale. It's just a free-for-all.
Yeah, that's about what it was.
Before you go any farther, Dayna, just I want to set this up for anybody who's done any of this. We're going to a ladder stand on a humongous cherry tree in a fence line that's about 15 yards wide, full of sumac. And I get up there, and what took so long to get set up was the fact that I had an old Lone Wolf Assassin and then my tethered saddle that I was sitting in, and I needed to get two straps on that the Assassin to get it to fit around the tree. So it was just like anything that could have gone wrong did go wrong, so it was just a whole lot of extra steps that you normally don't have to take. Anyway, so yeah. I'll let you pick up where the deer was doing whatever it was doing.
Yeah. So the deer, it moved into the opening from the trees. It came up from that fence line, and it started scraping the ground a little bit. That's probably what saved us. And then he started heading into the corn, and you had cleared a few shooting lanes in the corn, in like the first 5 rows of the corn. And so he was right in the opening, and I asked you, I'm like, is it a good deer? And you're like, yeah. And come to find out after, you didn't really even hear what I said, but you still said yeah. And so I was shooting him, and I'm like, how far is he? But I didn't have time to range. So I get to full draw, and I get my pin on him. And of course, I don't think to stop him. So thank heavens that you stopped him, and I let it go. And I thought it was a great shot, but it wasn't as great as I thought it was. And I spined him. And so he's, kind of flopping around in the corn, and you turn to me and you're like, okay, Dayna, take a minute, get yourself together, but you need to go put another arrow in him. So I'm like, yeah. Okay. Took a couple deep breaths, climbed down the ladder stand, and then, had to go in, and I was like 5 feet from him. And this was, I don't know, it was very difficult, but it was also extremely cool to experience at the same time. It's kind of weird. It's a weird emotion. I'm not sure really how to explain it, but I'm about 5 feet from him. And of course he's just trying to get away because I'm a human, I'm a predator. And he's moving, and he finally holds still long enough to where I can put an arrow in him. And it was perfect shot, like perfect shot. And I literally saw the breath go out of his body, like out of the hole that I just shot into him. And it was really crazy. I just stood there for probably a good minute and just stared, because I wasn't really sure what was going through me, but I was very excited. I was happy, but it's never easy to take the life of an animal. And I'm very respectful of that, and also very excited for being successful and for completing the task that I'm there to complete,
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah.
Clint, I was at that point, my camera work, if it was, a 5 out of 10, let's call it a 3 out of 10 to freehand it to begin with. I mean, I was able to keep it together pretty good.
Yeah.
And I have to give the fact that I was in that saddle a lot of credit, because had I not have been in that saddle, it could have been a lot worse. You're able to swing so quickly and fluidly around that tree. Filming out of one of those, it was nice. But when she went down, and first of all, she aimed at the deer for 5 minutes, maybe 20. I'm not sure. And I'm like, shoot, for God's sakes. I couldn't see the deer. I'm like, you're killing me here. And I all that I can run through my head is she's freaking out because she's watching this life go out of this deer, and she knows that. I'm thinking one of two things is going to happen at this point. She's going to be ruined for hunting the rest of her life, or this is going to be a happy ending. It was going to go one of two ways. And then when she shot, and she just stood there in complete, I guess, now looking back, in complete reverence, I think would be a good way of describing it.
Yeah.
In respect, I thought the worst. I thought, it's done. I'm going to be finding out how to get Dayna on a plane early. And it wasn't that way at all. It was just, it was truly, I think I texted Clint. Didn't I text you right away that night? It's just
Yeah.
I think I said it was a privilege or something like that.
Yeah. You said that to me when we were in the tree.
And it was so cool to witness that. And whether I end up connecting this year or not, I think I'm going to call it a success, just because we were able to get that done.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I would do a few things differently, but in terms of, picking this stand or that stand, but I wanted, it's tough when you've got a new hunter out there, especially when you're used to having both feet on the ground. It's a challenge to,
Right.
I didn't want to make you climb up that huge oak tree or others like it every time.
Yeah.
I think one morning we were out, I felt so bad, Clint, because I'm up there trying to lock this saddle in, and Dana's trying to climb up the tree, and I'm like, kicking the assassin in. You know how you lock them in, right? And
Right.
bark is flying off the tree and onto Dana, and she's trying to climb up the tree and got a mouthful of bark, and it was just at times it was quite a circus, but
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got to climb up these 7'4" stride climbing legs.
well, I had a plan for that. Didn't I, Dana?
Yeah. Yep.
I brought along an extra stick, and I would just rearrange the sticks as I went up.
Yeah, that worked out very nicely.
Because there were
Except
a few
the one time they were really close together, so it was hard to get your foot on the actual step. And then my boot got caught, and I almost couldn't get my boot off the step.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, Jason gets probably about 15 feet out of 2 lone wolf sticks because of his stride.
Yeah. And I was wearing all of those clothes, and oh my gosh, my movement was restricted so much because of just the bulk of all of that. So I'm like trying to lift my leg up, and I can barely bend it. And it's difficult. It's very difficult to hunt in that much clothing.
Yeah, that's probably not something that you're used to being a Western game chaser, because you're used to being physically active, and you've got to kind of plan for inactivity and extreme cold in a whitetail sit. And kudos to you for trying to adapt to that when you're out of your element. That's got to be tricky.
Yes. Yeah, it's that first morning, or the first day, because the morning wasn't too bad, but that evening sit really, it got me. And I'm like, I don't know how to dress for this. I don't know how to layer for this, because you're right. Western hunting is so different, and you're active and you're moving. And so you're getting your body heat, and I've got that figured out, and how to stay warm and all of that in my layers for my Western hunting. But figuring out how to sit still for a few hours and not get cold when I get cold so easily, that was definitely difficult. And it's a lot colder back there, because here in Colorado, it's a dry cold, and back there it's a lot more humid. And so you can be in, 26 degree weather, but it'll feel like 22 or 23 degrees. And here it feels the temperature that it actually is, because you don't have that moisture in the air.
We had plenty of moisture. I mean, did we have a hunt, Dana, where we didn't get spit on? I mean,
no, I don't think so.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if it wasn't the trees dripping on us, it was snowflakes. And, although the first morning for her was relatively uneventful, for me, I had to, I brought up a lone wolf on that first sit, and I not thinking, we had just got 4 to 6 inches, 3 to 6 inches of snow, whatever it was, that first morning, and I grab a big vine, Clint, and I move it out of the way, and down comes, I don't know, a shovel full of snow down my back, and I'm just like, oh my God, I hate this already. It was just, you could not have planned a worse weather event, and I felt stupid, because I was telling Dana the whole time, I'm like, well, the whitetail gods are looking down on you, because this is the best weather stretch that you could have asked for, and it turned out to be just a crap sandwich. I mean, it just wasn't.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. Dayna, if you would have been here, let's see here. I think it would have been the day after you left. I went and grabbed a couple camera cards, and I was just shocked at the amount of activity that took place on the 31st and the 1st and the 2nd, in and around different spots. So it was a big learning experience for me to pull those cards because, I kept telling you, I haven't hunted this part of the farm, or I haven't hunted this part of the farm, and it's just because I haven't, and I'm still learning it. But I guess I knew enough to get you in a decent spot on that second night, or we just got really lucky. Either way, it worked.
Yeah. The stars aligned. That's for sure.
Right. Knowing what you know now about both the Western type hunting and the whitetail type hunting, is there any words of wisdom that you would give to someone that's looking to start hunting and maybe they don't live out west? Maybe their only option is, Wisconsin or Illinois or Minnesota, whatever the case may be. Would you tell them not to try the kind of hunt that you went on to begin with? If they were brand new,
maybe not to begin with.
Okay.
Yeah, just because that can. I mean, I've always been, I'm tough. Like I've always been that way, just because of how I was raised. My parents. Honestly, I would tell them, if somebody's looking to get into hunting, I would have my best advice would be to start with a rifle and, take it easy, go on a fun hunt with a rifle, with some friends, with your family. That would be the best thing to do for sure.
And Dayna, let me interject something here real quick. I've often dreamed about tackling the mighty Wapiti out west, right?
Yeah.
And I live on the flatland prairies of Illinois, right? I look at that Western challenge, and the more I look at it, the more it totally intimidates me at face value, because I am completely ignorant on the entire process. And I got this drive to want to do it. I really do. I want to be there. I want to see it. I want to go do it. But it's not the fear of failure that I worry about, because hunting, we fail all the time. It's just part of it. It's hunting. But it's the fear of getting myself into something that damn near could kill me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
I can't imagine why you'd say that, Clint.
Right. Well, you could die out there. And so what kind of so I want to do it, but what kind of advice would you give somebody like me that looks at it as a daunting task? And what kind of advice would you give me to get me over that, like, dude, you can do it hump?
I mean, really, you just got to get out there. It's very daunting, and it can be extremely scary, but nowadays there's so many sources and people, and if you can afford it, it's really worth it to go on a guided hunt. Maybe your first time, especially if you're from back east or Midwest and not really accustomed to the mountain hunting. Going with an outfitter and on a guided hunt is obviously the best thing you can do, but that costs a lot of money. So if you're on a budget, just get some friends, find somebody that's also interested in it, and plan a trip and just come out, because you're really not going to know what to expect until you're out here doing it. And, there are a lot of things that you can do to be safe. You can get like a GPS, those in reaches, they give you a lot of peace of mind just because you have that SOS button if something does go extremely wrong. But it's not often that happens. And if you educate yourself on the basics of surviving outside, it's really not that hard. And I know it's very daunting, but you just got to get out there and do it.
You ready, Clint?
Yeah, dude, let's do it. I'm ready.
Should we swing by?
I'll be your guide.
Wisconsin. Okay, well, you heard it here. We have it recorded. This ought to be good.
I ain't getting no younger. Let's do it.
Dayna, what's your biggest regret on this hunt?
Not shooting button bucks.
So Clint, we have an overabundance of deer, right? And one of the things that the folks that I leased the ground from, who were gracious enough to let me have Dayna come on as a guest, one of their hopes was that we would be able to take some antlerless deer, and unfortunately for me, I didn't clarify for Dayna what an antlerless deer was. So let me just back up and say that the landowner, Dayna, weren't we visiting Derek, and he had said, you guys should check out the gas line, and
yeah.
And then we checked out the gas line, and then I brought you back here, and I went and set up a stand, and I came back all fired up, Clint, because it was like the Shangri-La of deer, deer stands. It was perfect. Everything about it was good, except it's not really what you would draw up on a whiteboard in terms of the actual the features, like it was on the edge of a fence line or on the edge of a piece of timber and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so they had told us to go to this spot, and eventually, we did. And so we get out there that morning, and Dayna, that was the morning that there was deer running everywhere, right?
Yeah. Chasing that, all the bucks chasing the does through the field, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. And so we've got this antlerless deer coming in, and at that point I don't know what it is, and it's getting close, and it's on the other side of the fence, and it jumps the fence, and I'm like, oh, it's a button buck, and she's like, oh, shoot. And I'm like, oh, well, she must have an aversion to shooting. I don't have a problem with that. There's plenty of bucks. Plenty of bucks. You saw the trail camera pictures, right, Dayna? There's plenty of bucks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I never clarified, and it gave her, I don't know, somewhere between 1 and 1,000 great shot opportunities.
They always do.
I think I recorded him on my phone for a minute.
They always do.
And how did it actually come up, Dayna? I don't even remember.
Oh, I don't even remember. I think it was like the last day. And I said something about, I would have shot that one buck, but then you said he was a button buck. So I realized I couldn't shoot him. And you were like, those count as antlerless, right? And I was like, what? Like, no, I had no idea, because I've had like 6 opportunities and I haven't even tried it because I didn't know I could shoot them. So that was a bummer.
Clint, you have never seen a look of disappointment in anyone more than I saw that day. She looked absolutely brokenhearted and let down, and I'm like, oh man, I should have been smarter than this. I should have told her. The girl's a killer. She's a straight up killer. And she likes and she likes deer meat. So
Love deer meat.
put those two things together and invite Dayna over. She'll put a dent in your population.
Slang it.
Yep. Even button bucks.
Oh man. Yeah, exactly. So, so that's your biggest regret. What's the best
Yes.
what's the best memory other than having to run back to my apartment every day because I forgot my cell phone, my release, my backpack, whatever the case is?
But definitely after like climbing back up in the tree after I had that second shot on my buck. And I just remember just sitting there and I could not wipe the smile off my face. I was so excited. Oh my gosh, I was just so happy. And I literally could not wipe the smile off my face. And it was just a good feeling. That's definitely the highlight of the whole trip.
Awesome. Well, it was absolutely a gift that I will absolutely cherish for the rest of my life to have witnessed that.
Yeah.
First of all, your expression after you shot and whatever vocalizations came out of you, it was sheer joy. And then I'm like, hey, we got to gather ourselves here and you need to go let the air out of him. And you did. And then it was just a whole bunch of fun. Which is what it should be. It was a blast. And that's one of the cool things about filming and having a partner in a tree and stuff like that is you get to experience with somebody else. So that's something I want, everyone else to take away, as well as, it can be a team sport. Doesn't mean you have to film. But wouldn't you agree, Clint, hunting with your brothers is more fun than solitary confinement?
Oh, man, I'll tell you tonight, dude, my brothers and I don't get to hunt like we used to when we were kids. You know what I mean? And my brother Matt and I got into the timber and we put the decoy out and he was shooting, I was filming. And we had a 3-year-old we know really, really well come into the decoy, and he stayed in the decoy wanting to try him for 30 minutes. Like, I actually had to stop the camera to conserve battery on it because he was there so long, and he did everything. We thought he was going to hit it, never did, right? We knew he wasn't going to shoot. We knew we weren't going to shoot this deer, but we had such a good time for 3 hours of pure whitetail euphoria with my brother that we never get to do but more than 3 or 4 times a year. And that's the point, right? Like, isn't that the point of is having fun and being a part of the experience? Like, that's the whole point. We're there to do a job. We're there to kill. Plain and simple. But I wouldn't have traded tonight's hunt for one of the biggest bucks that I'm chasing tonight. Like, it was such a good time.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget about that in this day and age with social media and with the desire to get the biggest buck on the ground for their pictures. They sometimes forget that it's about the relationships and the experience that you get from hunting.
Yeah. And, people forget it so much, I think, that it clouds their judgment and it changes them into people that they don't really want to be, or they don't, it changes them, like in a sometimes a negative way. Like, we should be celebrating the experience of just being free as a bird for a day. You know what I mean? Like, being out chasing critters under a blue sky, being with your friends, your family, your brothers, your sisters, anyone. That fills me up. That fills me up. It really does.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that statement more. Whether it's sharing a tree with David like I did for so many years, sharing a tree with my son, and now this year I got to share the tree with Dayna. It was just it's just a blast, and I think you guys both alluded to it, and I think I said it to you, Dayna. It's a problem when we start measuring our success in inches and not in memories. Because at the end of the day, none of those inches are going to matter. It's what's going to matter is the memories. And so thanks for letting me be a part of this. It'll be a memory that I have forever, and it'll be a good one. And I know that you made quite an impression, I would say, on the folks around here. Everybody loved you wherever we went. She got an invite, Clint, back, for another year. But in addition to that, I believe, didn't you get an invite to come back out gun hunting this year, which is sort of sacrilege as far as I know.
I did. Yeah.
I'm like, we don't need her out here gun hunting. We won't have any deer left.
Oh, I'll leave some.
Yeah. Oh, Clint, you got anything else you want to ask?
I'm just not really, but I will add that, again, you touched base on it a little bit when you were sizing that buck up for the second shot. And that's a weird deal. I've been in that situation before, and it's not like you're there to do the job and to see it through, and it's a pressure cooker situation, and you've got like so much adrenaline, and you just got a lot of shit to mitigate. You know what I mean? And to hold yourself together and to finish the job and do it humanely and as quick as possible. But to be there in his last moments, it's very difficult for me to quantify that. And I don't feel, it's not that I feel good about being there with them when I have to finish one, essentially. We all love to see a 10 ring and watch him fall over, but I've been in those situations before, and it's an experience that it can go one of two ways, like Jason alluded to earlier. It can sour you on the experience, or you can appreciate it for what it is and take solace in the fact that you've done your job and you've done it well. And I think there's something to be said for that. And I appreciate you sharing that story with us and with everyone. And I'm just super pumped for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
I just have to add a couple of observations, Dayna.
Okay.
I did learn a couple things from Dayna while she was here. Your bow can be stored in many different positions. It can be, rested on, the sight. It can be used as a walking stick. Honestly, I was always of the school of thought that you had to be delicate, and I'm not, advocating people go out and, use it as a, tree saw or anything like that. But, yeah, you're definitely, you definitely put your equipment through the paces.
Yes. And that's why I shoot a Hoyt, because it can handle the tests I put it through.
I would say you, by the looks of that Hoyt, you put it through quite a bit.
Yes, but it's still my baby.
Clint, it looks like my truck after driving it through the middle of the timber.
Not
like
that
rolled
bad.
It down like you rolled it down a mountainside. It's got like weeds and crud all mashed into the cams.
No, it wasn't quite that bad, but I could tell it had come into contact with more than Dayna's bow case. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Yes. It helped me up a few steep slopes this year for sure.
Dayna, favorite thing or things about Wisconsin?
The people.
People. Cool.
Yeah. Everybody I met there. Oh my goodness. They were so great. They just so great.
Yeah. They were. I'm super fortunate to be able to associate with those folks, and everyone invited us in. I think everyone offered us dinner. We got brought a trick-or-treat basket on Halloween. Didn't we? Yeah, with $100,000 bars in it. And we had chicken and ham one night with some of the folks whose ground we hunted on. It was just it was a great experience overall.
Yes. Yes, such a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you coming back, kid?
I'll be there next year for sure.
Right on. Right on.
I think she will too. I really think she will.
Oh, I will. You just wait.